Hello, Edwina Murphy-Droomer is my name, and I want to warmly welcome you to this interview in the series that is all about unleashing the audacious woman within. Today, we have with us Dr. Patti Britton, who is a clinical sexologist and educator. So if I can take this moment just to let you know that if you have little sensitive ears around, we will be diving into the conversation of sex. So if you want to pop in your headphones or perhaps listen to it when you have a delicious moment to yourself, then this is the opportunity to do that. Dr. Patti has been on numerous TV shows. She's been in many popular magazines and has written over 5 books, sharing her wisdom in supporting women to experience ultimate power, ultimate pleasure, and sexual power. Welcome, Patti, and thank you so much for being with us today. I know before we hit record, you said it's 100 degrees out where you are. Here it's cold, it's the middle of winter. For my Australian audience who don't know what 100 degrees, I think it's about 40 Celsius. So it sounds hot. So we'll forgive you if you start to melt.
Different parts of the world, I know.
Oh my goodness, yes. Chalk and cheese, it's all opposites. So, Patti, for those in our audience that haven't had the pleasure of meeting you yet, would you take a minute just to tell us a little bit about who you are and how you came to be doing the work that you do now?
Oh, I would love to. It's always an odd question because I'm an elder in my field.
Yeah.
As a clinical sexologist. I've been doing this for over 40 years. And my passion is really helping women in particular and couples. And I have a compassion for males as well. And as a clinician, I've always kind of had this passion to help people around their sexuality and to help people become who they really truly can be and express and manifest as a sexual person. We're innately sexual from the day that we're actually from conception until the day that we die. And I've always had this special leaning into celebrating sexuality. I don't know why. It's come from my family. It's come from the culture, the era in which I grew up. And I've really evolved myself as a woman in her 70s. Yes, I am. Who has seen it all, been through it all, done it all. And yet I still see the ravages of shame, toxic shame around our bodies, around our ability to experience pleasure and our entitlement to experience pleasure. I think that's one of the big keys. And so I'm a grandma. I am someone who has deliciously been in the profession as a sexologist for almost my entire career. And about 25 years ago, I earned my Ph.D. in human sexuality. Later on, I earned my master's in public health. And I married what I knew as a sexologist, which was really the what of human sexuality and how it affects us as humans and how we kind of clear the debris around experiencing our full potential with life coaching. And that's really become my mission and my path in life. Is in 1993 when I earned my PhD, I also thought, I don't like the way sex therapy is being done. I feel this calling to marry sexology, the study of human sexual behavior and its impact on us all, and coaching as this wonderful, collaborative, uplifting, positive, empowerment-based way to let people become fully who they can be. Yeah. And so that's been my path ever since. And I'm sort of known as the mother of sex coaching because I marry sexology and coaching. And now my mission in the world until I leave the planet is to train as many people as I can to become consummate, credentialed, caring professionals who do this work. And that's what I do at sexcoachu.com. And right now I'm proud to say that we have students in over 65 countries, including Australia and down under. And it's just every day I get up and I just feel so blessed that I see my legacy in action. And I feel like I'm just one of the luckiest women on earth. And I'm also a human. So part of the story that I want to share is that I'm a widow.
Yeah.
And I lost my partner, life partner, 3 years ago. And I'm a voice for walking your talk, and I'm a voice for even in a pandemic and lockdown and shutdown, because we're not just in lockdown, we're in shutdown mode. There's a possibility to find that excitement, that energy to sustain us. Because that's, I believe our sexual life is connected to our life force energy. Yeah. And that we need to ignite that. We need to find that. We need to express that, especially as women. It's part of what keeps us flourishing and alive and juicy and excited about what's going to happen next. And we also need to find ways of connecting with others. And I think we're finding that today more than ever. Yeah. The need for a sense of that global family, which I have through my work, but I also have through the relationships that I create. And I'm an online dater, so I have a lot to say.
My brain is racing. I've got at least 4 or 5 different areas that I want to take this conversation. But I think I'm just going to go with my gut instinct on this one. And I want to dive, right back at the beginning, you addressed shame. And I feel like, for so many women, this is something that we, carry with us for years. And as I've got 4 children, 2 of whom are teenage daughters. But having these conversations with them, reflecting on the conversations that my mum sort of had with me, be beautiful, be sexy, but don't have sex, like it's all these kind of mixed messages that come through. How do we start to, I know it's a massive question. I know it's a massive question, but, where do you start with addressing that? Do we, maybe if we talk about how we talk to our teenage girls about this, it's going to be the same as how we talk to ourselves maybe when we were 17, if we can go back and have that conversation with ourselves.
Well, the foundation is you have to love yourself. That really is the foundation.
Yeah.
And the only lifelong relationship we're ever going to have is the one with ourselves, like it or not. And until we master that, until we get to that place of self-acceptance, because it's not just self-love, that's such a cliche, but self-acceptance. And it particularly is around our bodies. The body shame is where most of the monster energy comes from. And we're different from cisgendered males. I'm using terminology and sexology that because we live in an era and a world with such diversity today. Yeah. And we have women who identify as queer or fluid or trans who may be watching and listening today. So cisgendered means biologically born as a female and living in congruity with who we feel ourselves to be or know ourselves to be. So as women in particular, because our genitals are hidden. Yeah. It's down there. I think of down there, right?
Down under.
Down under. And there's this, and there's this sense of ooh or ew. And we have to claim that part of ourselves. We have to celebrate that part of ourselves. And we have to feel empowered to set healthy boundaries. And when we think about, at least in the United States, and I imagine that it's not that much better around the world, there really is very little comprehensive, sex-positive, affirming sexuality education. So guess where it lands? It lands in the laps of parents. Many years ago, I was in the executive leadership at National Planned Parenthood in the United States, Planned Parenthood Federation of America. And one of the things that I was responsible for was a month of celebration and education that was called NFSM, National Family Sex Education Month, because parents are, by definition, the primary sexuality educators of their children, whether they do it or not, whether they know it or not, whether a parent is comfortable with his, her, their own body, whether parents show affection, whether they kiss in front of their children, how they regard the body. Even there's studies that show that mothers treat infant boys differently than infant girls. Hello, it starts so young.
Yeah.
how we touch the body, how we treat and regard the body. So we have to claim and own our own body space that we live in. And we have to begin to overcome the shame around that and own it.
Yeah.
I say, name it, claim it, own it. And that's part of the journey. And I just feel for girls in particular that there's so many mixed messages in the media, in the marketplace of life, right? And, you know, we used to say years ago, we use sex to sell cars and toothpaste. So sex is commodified. It becomes a commodity, becomes a basis for negotiation. But we own our bodies. We have the birthright to our own bodies. So setting those boundaries and having the power to set and claim and really keep those healthy boundaries around our bodies, but also have positive self-regard is so important for sexual wellness. I'm about sexual wellness, and I'm about empowerment of girls and women. The other thing that's really important to know is that pleasure is now being regarded internationally as a sexual right. That is one of the sea change moments that happened in Mexico City in 2019 at the World Congress of Sexology, the World Congress of Sexual Health, of which I am a part, actually had a declaration for sexual pleasure as a part of sexual health. That's a radical notion in 2019. Do you all understand that? We're just coming around to that. So how do we get out of, you know, the shackles of the negativity around our bodies, the negativity of sex?
Yeah.
And some of the religious and cultural values that lock us into these tiny boxes about what sex is supposed to be.
Yeah.
That's really the work ahead of us.
Yeah.
Does that answer it?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah. And I do. I love that. Starting with the, you know, the self-love. It's, but, you know, looking at the mixed messages on social media that all of us are tuning into, there's so many positives. I look at, you know, the shift in, you know, bigger models, and, you know, there's lots of messaging that's really positive, but I wonder how much of that our girls are seeing, younger girls, because they're not necessarily tuning into that. There's still the messages of what's beautiful is, you know, you have to be thin, you have to have, you know, this perfect kind of everything then makes you worthy of love. Those messages are still strong.
Well, maybe the shift is not happening globally, but the shift is happening at least in the United States. And I'm sure many of you who are watching and listening are from all over the world. And so you have to look at your own context. Everything is driven by a context. We're like fish who swim in our own sea. And yet all those seas, S-E-A-S, do connect. But we have to be mindful of what's infecting and affecting us. And I'm using that pun very deliberately about infecting, because we're living in a time right now with the world pandemic that is affecting us in ways that are really making us live and coming from a fear-based approach to life itself. And sometimes we're given messages, particularly as girls and women, to be afraid of other, to be afraid of love, to be afraid of sex, to be afraid of whatever it is in our midst or that we long for. And so I think that there's a revolution going on around diversity. The other pandemic that's happening in the United States is a pandemic of exorcising the racism.
Yeah.
And it's really about honoring and accepting diversity. Even as sexual beings, we're so diverse.
Yeah.
You know, how my sexual pattern works as a female toward my orgasmic potential and my pleasure is totally different from the next woman or the next male or the next whatever.
Yeah.
We're all unique individuals, and our sexuality expresses uniquely. But there's also a movement to change the conversation around what is beautiful. And there are people who are really stepping forward and saying, I am fat. I am not ashamed of that. In fact, that is my statement of my worthiness and my beauty. And it's controversial, okay? So these norms are shifting, but I think that the Me Too movement, which has certainly tapped into, you know, our psyche globally, has really shifted the conversation. And part of what, as a sexologist, I'm about is giving my clients, my students, anyone with whom I encounter a conversation, permission to be you. Yes. And permission to find your voice and speak out. Yes. And to find your pathway to who you really are. Now, of course, my filter, I'm going to put my hands up, even though this screen sometimes makes it look like these weird webbed things from under the water, but I talk with my hands. So, yeah. So sometimes it's really about finding our voice and our path to expressing ourselves. And sometimes it's finding when we choose to be silent, but we're entitled to authentically become our sexual self. So my filter is always going to be, as a sexologist, looking at the sexuality component of life itself, which sometimes is a metaphor for life in all other ways. Yeah. Right?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, the whole premise behind doing this show is unleashing the audacious woman within, because I feel like we come through our lives and it's like we get covered in this great big cloak of who we should be and how we should behave and how we should dress. And, you know, every layer of our life comes with all these rules and boundaries. And what I would love to do is to provide women this space to just start peeling that cloak off and working out who you are, who you want to be in, you know,
I love
authentically.
That.
So, you know, what are this, you know, if somebody comes to you in that space, what are the steps that you take to start peeling back those layers?
Well, first I give them permission.
Yeah.
There's a model in sex therapy. Now, I'm a sex coach and a sexologist, not a sex therapist. And I'm very distinct about that, because therapy tends to use a mental health model, at least in Western civilization, that comes from a diagnostic treatment model that medicalizes sexuality and our norms. Mm-hmm. What might be natural now has a diagnosis behind it. Yeah. And I'm not really in favor of that. I'm not really a fan of the medicalization or the medical model. I'm a whole person-centered healer. Yeah. I believe in a humanistic approach that's engaging all parts of the self. And I believe that, and I've observed and I teach people, that there are actually 5 parts of the sexual self. Okay. And that's the mind, the emotions, the physical or the body, the energy, and the spirit. And so those 5 parts of the sexual self actually need to be opened up. And we need to identify, where are we stuck? Where are the boulders in the road, so to speak, or the kangaroos? I was saying to you earlier that when I visited Australia, I was like totally shocked that a kangaroo like came out from the side of the road. I'm like, oh my God, what a giant creature, this giant rabbit-like thing. But, you know, that can happen metaphorically in our lives, where something huge jumps out at us and stops us in our path. And it could be what we're thinking. Usually it's what we're telling ourselves. This is one of the biggest culprits when it comes to sexual opening up. Is we're running, we don't have tapes anymore. We're running an MP3 in our head that's telling us, you know, you're not good enough. You're not thin enough. Your boobs are too big. Your boobs are too small. You're not deserving enough. You're not young enough. I hear that a lot among my peers, because my special area that I love working with is sexuality and aging. This is my sweet spot, because these are my sisters and my brothers that I love to empower to know that sex doesn't stop just because you reach a number. In fact, it needs to keep going. Use it or lose it is real. But getting back to these 5 parts of the sexual self, we stop ourselves, or we grow up with messaging, just what you're talking about, so relevant. How does a parent address their daughter's evolution, their changing pubertal body, or their sons? And how do we really evolve when we've been shamed or bullied or ignored or rejected? How do we deal with all that crap? Yeah. Because that's just noise, really. And if we can learn how to move through that and how to heal ourselves, or have a coach or a great therapist or whomever it is that can be that person to hold space for us, to help us really clear the debris in the road. And the body is where we think about sex showing up. And, you know, as we age, and I know your sweet spot is really moms, right? 35 to 65. And 35 is really different from 65. I mean, really different.
I know.
But, you know, I have women who have been in my practice, because I do have clients that I've served over many, many years, even though I mostly train others to do the work I do now. I've had women in their 30s who are in a dead marriage, and I've had people in their 60s who are the hottest people I've ever met, because they've learned how to clear the blockages out of their path and learn how to be in flow, because you have to be in mental, emotional, physical, energetic, and spiritual flow. And maybe we can talk more about spirit in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So your secret formula for reclaiming sexual fulfillment in your life is that you touched on the 5 areas. Is that what you're referring to when you think about your secret formula? There are going to be many women listening to this that aren't mothers. Obviously, a lot of my audience are mothers as well. And I know that we go through these various phases in our lives, certainly when we've got young kids. You know, sex becomes another thing. You know, we can be so exhausted and our hormones are all over the place, and then we go into perimenopause and then menopause, and we sort of have all these different phases in our lives where, you know, our desire for sex ebbs and flows. But I'm wondering, you know, how you address that and how you support women to find it again when it's perhaps ebbed.
Well, it's a lot of things. I mean, I could answer that question in about 6 hours, and I'm going to try to hone it down
I get
to
it.
a very short amount of time, because this is my life's work.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm going to jump into what pure sexology would tell you, and that is you need to prime the pump. If you're not being sexual with a partner, you need to know your own body, you need to love your own body, and you need to love your own body at a physical level. So masturbation, solo sex, self-love at that physical level is essential. It is its own sexual outlet for expression. So it's not a lesser kind of sex. And what's so fascinating about it is that it's the model for how you relate to a partner. If you don't know how your own body works sexually, if you don't understand or know or feel de-shamed or courageous or informed or enlightened enough to know where your clitoris is, how to touch your clitoris, what part of your sexual anatomy gets you to go, I love that, or, ooh, no, I don't want that, then you've got some work to do to get to know your own sexual response and to know your body and what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And then you have a dog in the background. That's adorable.
He makes an appearance often.
Love it. Mine are being quiet, thank God. But what's important is to know how your own body works so that you can experience the pleasure of that and the fulfillment of that and this rare sense of, I'm going to say, sacred connection with self. That's part of what this is really about. And how to know how your body works becomes the platform for telling or asking or showing a partner. What do you need? What do you want? What do you long for? And I think that so many women don't give themselves permission. That word's going to keep coming up. I'm going to keep saying it. I'm the voice of permission for my clients, and then they internalize Patti and they give themselves permission. I have clients after 20 years who say, I'll never forget when you said, and I'm living in their head, because we have to have that reminder that we deserve, that we're entitled, or how. We're not taught how to be lovers with ourselves or others. We fumble and, find our way, maybe trial and error. If we're lucky, we learn how to make this beautiful thing called our body the instrument that the music plays through. That's what I see sex as, is the music that plays through this thing called our body, the instrument. And to be a consummate player, you got to know how your instrument works first yourself. And the other missing element often is fantasy. In this era that we're living in right now of lockdown and shutdown, fantasy is needed more than ever, whether you're alone with your dog or, and I know you're not, or you're with your beloved, your sweetie, your partner of so many years, or whomever it is that you're with, who you may be connecting with sexually. Fantasy brings energy into what is happening for you. And I'm a big advocate of watching, of listening, and creating erotica. Erotic, to me as a sex doc, erotic is the precursor to sexual. And so if we can energize ourselves to get our mind, because, 90% of sex occurs between what? The ears, not the legs. And so we've got to activate our thinking and our imagination and our feelings so that we open up, especially when we're living in this soup, this context of so much being shut down, and we're in so much denial and contraction right now. All of us feel it. If we're not conscious of it, we may be saying, how come I'm not in a good mood today when everything seems to be working okay? Well, because maybe you turn on the news, or maybe you're just feeling it when you go to the store and you're wearing a mask and people are giving you a strange look through what's revealed of their eyes today. We're in such a strange time, and it's not over, and it won't be over soon, and it will change, and there will never be a renaissance back to how it was. There will be a new normal, and we are being habituated to be afraid of others. We are being habituated right now to not trust others. The normative response to being in a room or online with another human being has been erased right now. So how do we naturally, organically even begin to relate? And how do we date? In this era right now, when really kissing is out. Kissing is now the unsafest act one can do. And, I'm advocating, I've written articles for magazines recently, and I've been interviewed for summits about how do we date in the era of COVID. We have to find new ways. We have to get very creative. Fantasy is a really important part of that. We have to learn, and ironically, how to be safe may take us to more sexual behavior than affectional behavior like it used to be, because we can't kiss. Think about that. And kissing is the gateway to arousal for most people, for most couples. It's how we smell a potential partner. It's how we taste them. It's how we exchange. There's actually scientific data about how we exchange bacteria. We're really sussing out, is this a good fit for me from a biological perspective? It's wiped out. We can't do that anymore. Until we're in a safe monogamous container or a polyamorous container, because we now live in a world where poly relationships are very much prevalent. So how do we navigate and negotiate that? We have to be very content with where our boundaries are and where we want our boundaries to be. And then we have to feel empowered to ask for what we want and need. And communication is often the frontier where I see my couples fail. They can work through a lot of issues, but they're too scared, too vulnerable, too shame-based, feeling too broken, a word I hate when people say, we're broken. You're not broken. Let's lift the vibration and talk about what we can do. Nobody's broken. But we need to learn how to communicate. And that's really where the deficit occurs for a lot of, they can do it, but they can't talk about it, meaning sex. I know I've just said a lot. I don't know if I answered the question at all.
And there's a couple of things in there. One is, in my mind, I know once I started working with a coach, I knew I'd never not never not have a coach in different areas of my life. Having somebody where you know, that holds a space where you can safely articulate the stuff that's going around in your head is life-changing. It's absolutely life-changing. And I also love that you're talking about, you know, this lockdown in conjunction with, you know, raising our vibrations. I like to talk about, you know, yes, we're locked down. Yes, we're being shut in, but we can create this beautiful bubble. And there's lots of things that we can do to make this bubble a really awesome place to hang out. One is leaving the news off. But it's, you know,
a diet. We have to go on a diet.
Of
how much we'll let in of all this negativity, because energy is energy, and we're affected by energy. Energy runs everything, including sex.
So any conversation that I'm having where we can, within this beautiful safe bubble that we're creating, we can up our vibration, up our level of joy and happiness, and, you know, that sense of excitement for life again, is awesome. So of course sex is part of that picture.
And it may be sensual. It may not be sex in the way we think about it. But I love what you just said, which is I had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a sexologist a couple of weeks ago. Someone that is very close to me, whom I rarely see because he and his wife are scared that they're going to be infected. So even friendships have shifted, and close friendships have shifted in a way that has created distance and separation and that sense of isolation. And I said to him, I feel like I live in a beautiful prison, my home. And he said, stop saying that word. You live in a beautiful sanctuary. And I went, thank you. I needed that reframing. And that's what we need to do all the time, is really look for the good, look for the positive. Live toward joy. Where can I evoke more joy in my life? Whether it's through orgasm, that's not the only pathway to joy, although it's a good one. And it has a lot of health benefits as well. Joy, you know, the vibration of love, the vibration of joy, and of celebration of life. Let's look at how grateful we are for what we have. And that you and I are well talking right now in the midst of a world pandemic where so many have lost their health and their lives. And there's still an opportunity to look at what's so wonderful about life today. And what may come out of this may be a different quality of life. And I know a different value system about life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that conversation around fear, I was talking to a girlfriend last night whose daughter has become very afraid, and she's very tuned in to everything that's going on. And her mum is just like, turn the news off. You don't need to be afraid. It's okay. And it's actually tearing them apart.
I'm so sorry.
It's not just happening in communities. It's happening in families. It's a tricky time. It's a tricky time. So, you know, part of this series absolutely is looking at how we do things to support ourselves and unleash that audacious woman within. But part of this series is also acknowledging that there's lots of career changing happening across the world. And as I listen to you, I know, you know, my background is naturopathy. And while I don't work as a naturopath now, I studied it. That information has been life-changing for myself and my family, and something that I use with my clients. So, you know, for those that are listening that are going, sexology, now there's something I never thought of. Another possibility. Talk to us a little bit about how you support women to explore actually studying in that field.
Well, it's interesting given that we're living in an era of a pandemic and an economic disaster zone. Really, I mean, let's look at reality for a second. And where can we uplift ourselves as a result of that? And my program, where I train sex coaches around the world to become competent, credentialed professionals in this space, is sexcoachu.com, letter u.com. And I was worried. I was really worried when the popcorn began to go up. People were saying, oh, I lost my job. I can't keep my payments up, because one of my philosophical tenets as a business owner is most of my students are females.
Yeah.
I'm teaching people all around the world. We have students in over 65 countries. I'm so proud to say it's such a diverse global family. I say the energy of this organization runs on love because I love every single student and they feel that. And I have an incredible team all around the world to support them because it's not just a pay and play. You're supervised all along the way. And I was worried that the pandemic was going to slow down the possibility for people to keep up with their payment plans because I allow people to come into the program and I finance them, I carry them. And I was blown away because we had an enrollment and we broke our record for the number of people who had saved up the money already to come into the program because they see it. It's an online business teaching you how to have an online business. Yeah. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so lucky that we're in this moment where I can be of service to so many people around the world who not only are looking for a way to sustain themselves financially, but who feel that passion, who feel that calling. Yeah. And so we only take really a handful of applicants during our enrollment periods. But if this is something that any of you who are watching and listening feel like, oh my God, I want to do that, then go to sexcoachu.com and get on the waiting list because that's how you'll learn more about it. But this is my baby. This is my passion project in the world. My mission is to train as many people that are qualified to come into the program as I can. So it's so exciting. We're really changing the world. I know that.
I'm just curious if the question's in my mind, I know it's going to be in other people's minds. How long is it? Is it a 1-year program or what's the length?
It takes people usually about a year, but people have up to 2 years. It's actually, we just added a third component a year ago, and that's business success training. And that's what's lacking in so many programs in psychotherapy or in coaching or in any of the other healing modalities. We recognized that people were coming through the program and they were getting what they needed to know as sexology about human sexual behavior, but they didn't really know how to make a business out of it. And so that's what I'm so excited about. I love the business program. And so we have sexology, we have coaching, and we have business, which is 36 courses.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
That's a really robust program.
There's for people like you and I who have been running, a business online for some time, we're very fortunate to be in this space, but now we get to pass it on and show others how to do the same.
No, I also offer scholarships to deserving applicants. And one of the criteria is you have to pay it forward when you're done.
Love it. So I have a question that I'm asking all my speakers, and I think that you're going to have a lot of possibilities to choose from. But the question I would love to ask you is, in your life, what is one or the most audacious thing you've done? Bold, daring, without restrictions of prior ideas. I'm dying to hear this one.
It's funny. I have an image of a dress that I bought. Because I'm a sexologist, I'm exposed to things like swingers conventions, to BDSM, aka 50 Shades of Grey gatherings. The full spectrum of whatever you can think of in terms of fetishes or human sexual behavior. I've probably witnessed it. I haven't necessarily done it because I'm my own person and I know my boundaries and who I am. When my partner, Dr. Robert, was alive, we were together as a partnership in business and in life, and he was a fellow sexologist. And we used to say, we're actually kind of vanilla people, like a little bit conservative, but our minds are infinitely naughty. So probably the most audacious thing I ever did was I bought this black leather dress that was skin tight, that had an open back and a lot of cleavage was able to be seen. And it came just below the crotch. And I had my hair down, and my boyfriend at the time and I went to, I think it was an adult convention, and I wore that. And he did an erotic photo shoot of me in the dress against a wall with like whips and shackles and things like that. That was pretty audacious, but I'm sure I have other examples as well.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And I talk often to the women that I work with around, we don't need to put ourselves in a box. We all have everything in us, from Pretty Woman who wants to wear that outfit and those boots to, the Audrey Hepburn, we've got the full gamut. We get to not, need to put ourselves in a neat little box. We can explore all. So
there's no one right way to be you.
Yeah.
Because every single one of us is unique and amazing and special. Yeah. And we just have to find who you is. You know, who is that unique Patti who gets to show up?
Yeah.
And when I was in grad school, the most amazing conversation happened around this concept. A fellow student of mine in the doctoral program, who happened to be very involved in the kink and BDSM community, said to us one day, "You're not just one person. You're an apartment house of sexual personae who live in your body. Who's here today?" And that was like the most freeing moment for me. And I went, I get it. Thank you.
Yeah. I realize that we're probably heading to go over time, but I would ask you if we've got a few more minutes. Are you okay to go for a little bit longer?
Yeah.
There was a reason why 50 Shades of Grey was so phenomenally impactful. And, from my perspective, it was, just diving into a world that we haven't possibly felt like we had access to before. It was like seeing behind a curtain. Why do you see that as having been such a huge global success?
Because what you said, it had that quality of forbidden, secret, dark, unknown.
Yeah.
And it's playing on our hunger for fantasy and energy exchange. Yeah. So what BDSM, bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, sadomasochism, those 4 letters represent 3 distinct categories. Yeah. What that is really about is the exchange of erotic power. Mm-hmm. And we want and long to find our own pathway to our own erotic power and to play with that. We all long for that. And we all have something in us. Doesn't mean that's our orientation or we want to have somebody take a flogger and whip our back or our bottom, or that we want to dress in a dress that is binding, made of latex that makes us look like Catwoman. I don't mean that. We all have our own style, our own path that we'll discover if we allow ourselves to. But there's something about what happened with that mainstreaming of a kind of secret phenomenon that allowed us to pull back the curtain and look inside and go, maybe there's a part of me in that. Yeah. So I think that's a lot of it. And energy runs everything. In my model, the MEBES model, my favorite way to show it is as a wheel. And in the center of the wheel is energy, because energy runs our lives. And this is playing with the energy. And it's so delicious.
I love talking about play. That, I refer to it often, but the first person I heard actually do this was Brené Brown, and she talked about writing herself a permission slip. And
I love her.
Yeah, you talked about that, giving people permission. It's like we just get to have permission to play, be a bit naughty outside of the,
Sex is about play.
Yes.
We got to get that.
Yeah.
And we got to free ourselves to play.
Yeah. Yeah.
In all the ways we can.
I clearly remember reading 50 Shades of Grey, and a few of my girlfriends were reading it at the same time, and the conversations were so good. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we had fun with it.
Yeah.
It was great.
It's wonderful. She cracked the code in a way,
Yeah.
She allowed normies to know about this private world.
Yeah.
And it's a very important part of our human selves to open up.
Yeah. And
to
I
the
think it
extent that we
provided,
want.
we touched on it a little bit. It provided a tool that gave us a way to articulate or a reason to start talking and articulating.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Conversation openers.
Yes.
We need more of those.
Yes. Well, that's what you and I are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. This is
Thank you.
beautiful.
Thank you so much for your time. I know you have a gorgeous gift for the women who are tuning in, and I'm sure they're dying to hear what it is.
Well, I'm selling a whip and a JDEC. No, I'm only kidding about that. I'm not selling anything, but I'm giving away a book that is an ebook about pleasure. It's called For Her Pleasure. And it's a little journey to take to really touch base with who you are first, and then to know how to open that up and share it with a partner if you choose to do that. So it's a lot of fun. It's really cute, pretty, short. You'll have fun with it.
Perfect. We get to play. Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Patti. This has been an absolute
welcome.
delight.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it with you so much.
And
watch out for those kangaroos. That's all I can say.
I'll do my best.
All right. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
I would love to take this opportunity just to really address that one of my favorite things to do is to dive into the wisdom of women that are a generation or so older than myself and the audience that are tuning in. For some of you, not for all of you. But I just think there is so much wisdom to be gained, and it's such a missing piece in our society, in the way that our society is set up. So I am forever grateful to women like Patti that continue to do the work, that continue to show up and to share their wisdom that they've accumulated over a lifetime. So there was a lot in that interview, and we've touched on everything from shame to ultimate pleasure and creating a beautiful bubble. What is something that you can take away and take action on right now that is all about unleashing that audacious woman within? And of course, your imagination can run rife. Can we play in fantasy, or perhaps just play in creating that beautiful, safe bubble that is your home? What experience do you want to have in there? And what are the different ways that you can up your vibration, up your level of joy, happiness, and all the good stuff within your home? Start wherever is the right place for you, but just taking action one step at a time is how change happens and how we bring to life the life that we desire living. Okay, that's it from me today. So much love, and bye for now. Oh.